Step out of the car. Show me your ID.
I can, but you should know who I am.
I don't care. Hands visible now.
You cooperate. Are you detaining me?
You're under arrest. Don't move.
You just arrested a federal agent. Do you know what you've done?
The red and blue lights cut across the gas station like a wound opening in the dark. An ordinary stop, an ordinary night, and a mistake that would cost millions. A rookie cop's voice carried the certainty of authority. The man he arrested answered calmly, almost tired because he knew something the officer didn't. By sunrise, this arrest would cross federal desks. By year's end, it would rewrite careers, policies, and the meaning of accountability. Before we begin, take a moment to listen closely not just to what is said, but to what power sounds like when it goes unquestioned. If stories of justice, consequence, and quiet truth matter to you, stay with us. The gas station sat just off the state highway, a square of fluorescent light cut out of the surrounding dark. Bugs circled the lamps in lazy spirals. The hum of electricity blended with the distant rush of tires on asphalt. It was nearly midnight, the hour when routine feels heavier, when ordinary moments carry the quiet threat of becoming something else. The patrol car rolled in without urgency. Gravel shifted beneath the tires. The rookie officer slowed as he entered the lot, scanning the scene the way he'd been taught: hands, faces, movement, exits. Nothing chaotic, nothing overtly wrong, just a dark sedan at pump 3 and a man standing beside it, calmly refueling. The body camera clicked on, a small red light blooming on the officer's chest. It caught everything. The wash of white light across the concrete, the faint wind tugging at loose paper near the trash bin, the officer adjusting his vest before stepping out. He felt composed, prepared. This was the part of the job he understood best: control, through presence, authority, through posture. The man at the pump glanced over once. Not startled, not defensive, just aware. He returned his attention to the fuel gauge as it climbed, his movements unhurried, deliberate. His hands were visible. His shoulders relaxed. There was no rush to finish, no nervous energy. That calm registered in the officer's mind, faintly out of place. "Evening," the officer said, voice steady. "Evening," the man replied, turning fully now. His tone matched the quiet of the night. The officer closed the distance, boots tapping against concrete. He noted the man's age, the clean jacket, the absence of any obvious signs of distress or intoxication. Everything looked ordinary, too ordinary. Experience, or what passed for it, had taught him that calm didn't always mean compliance. "What brings you out here tonight?" the officer asked. The man considered the question. Eyes steady. "Getting gas." A simple answer. Honest. Almost dismissive in its simplicity, the officer felt a subtle tightening in his chest. In training videos, instructors talked about cooperation, how it sounded, how it looked. This felt different. Not hostile, just contained. "Where are you headed?" the officer pressed. "Home." Another pause, another answer that revealed nothing. The officer shifted his weight, conscious of the camera, the radio, the invisible expectations that came with the uniform. He reminded himself to follow procedure. Ask, assess, decide. "Can I see your identification, sir?" "Yes," the man said. But he didn't move right away. He looked at the officer again, as if calibrating something internal. Then he spoke, calmly. "Am I being detained?" The question landed heavier than it should have. The officer felt it ripple through him, stirring a defensive instinct he hadn't yet learned to recognize. People asked that question when they wanted to draw lines, when they wanted to test authority. "Right now, I'm conducting an investigation," the officer replied. "Understood," the man said. "Am I free to leave?" The fluorescent light seemed harsher suddenly. A car pulled into the far side of the lot, music thudding faintly before cutting off. The officer felt his pulse quicken, not fear, but pressure. This wasn't in the scripts he'd memorized. This was improvisation. "I need you to cooperate," the officer said, voice firmer now. "I am cooperating," the man replied. He spoke without edge, without emotion. That calm, unbroken, unyielding, felt like resistance even though it wasn't. The officer repeated the request for ID. This time, the man reached into his jacket slowly, deliberately, and produced a wallet. He removed a card and handed it over. The officer glanced down and frowned. It wasn't a driver's license. "What's this?" he asked. "That's my identification," the man said. "I asked for a state-issued ID. It's a federal credential." The word federal hovered between them. The officer felt heat creep up his neck. He'd heard claims like this before. People flashing unofficial cards, trying to intimidate their way out of accountability. Training had warned him about it. "Don't be fooled. Stay in control. Step away from the vehicle," the officer ordered. The man complied immediately. He shut off the pump, placed the nozzle back, and took slow steps backward. Hands visible. Movements careful. No hesitation. No argument. "Why are you making this difficult?" the officer asked, frustration slipping through the practiced neutrality. "I'm not," the man said. "I'm being accurate." That word accurate stuck. The officer felt his grip tighten on the situation. Accuracy was supposed to belong to him, to procedure, to the badge. The calm man standing beneath the lights felt like a quiet challenge to that assumption. The officer keyed his radio, requesting a check, his tone clipped and professional. Dispatch responded, asking for details. Timestamps began recording. Jurisdictional lines, unseen, unconsidered, quietly entered the frame. As the officer spoke, the man waited. He didn't plead. He didn't protest. He simply watched, as if observing something inevitable unfold. The officer made a decision. The cuffs came out, metal catching the fluorescent glare. The sound of steel clicking open echoed louder than it should have. The man's expression shifted for the first time, not to fear, but to recognition. A small tightening around the eyes. A breath drawn in, measured. "Officer," he said softly, "you should reconsider this." The officer stepped closer. Training took over. Hands behind the back. Control the subject. Maintain command presence. "I'm placing you under arrest," the officer said. "For what charge?" the man asked. "Failure to comply," the officer replied, even as the words felt thin in his own ears. The cuffs closed around the man's wrists. The click was final, irreversible. Somewhere on the body camera, the moment was frozen. Procedure over judgment, confidence over comprehension. As the officer guided him toward the patrol car, the man leaned in slightly, his voice low, almost regretful. "This stop is about to become much bigger than you think." The cruiser door opened. The red and blue lights reflected off the gas station windows, off the dark sedan, off the officer's badge. The night, once quiet and forgettable, had crossed a line, and it wasn't going back. The cuffs tightened with a final, metallic click. Not painful, not cruel, just absolute. The man didn't resist as the rookie officer guided his wrists together behind his back. His shoulders stayed loose, his breathing steady. He had worn restraints before on training ranges, during controlled demonstrations, in rooms where authority was understood without being shouted. What made this different wasn't the steel, it was the silence around it. The absence of recognition. The officer's hands moved automatically now. Thumb checked the fit. 2 fingers of space. Procedure clean. Textbook. His jaw was set, eyes forward, as if looking too closely at the man might invite doubt. Doubt was dangerous. Doubt was how control slipped. "Walk," the officer said. The man complied, steps measured as they crossed the concrete. The gas station felt suddenly exposed, its bright lights unforgiving. A pair of customers stood frozen near the entrance, watching without comment. One raised a phone halfway, then thought better of it. The moment hovered, witnessed but unresolved. The patrol car door opened. The officer guided the man inside, head ducked, movements practiced, vinyl seat, metal partition. The door shut with a hollow thud that cut off the outside world. Inside the car, the air felt different. Muted. Pressurized. The man sat upright, eyes forward, hands resting against the cuffs. He didn't ask to make a call. Didn't raise his voice. He looked like someone waiting for paperwork, not mercy. The officer returned to the driver's seat and keyed the radio. "Dispatch. I have 1 male detained," he said, voice clipped. "Requesting a records check." The dispatcher acknowledged. her tone neutral, unaware of what was already unfolding. A timestamp logged itself into the system. Location coordinates attached automatically. The machinery of accountability began turning, indifferent to intent. The officer glanced into the rearview mirror. Their eyes met briefly. The man didn't look angry. He looked tired, as if he had seen this shape of mistake before. "You want to tell me again who you say you are?" the officer asked. "I didn't say," the man replied. "I showed you. A2. The officer exhaled sharply. "That card doesn't mean anything to me." "It should," the man said calmly. "And it will," silence returned. Heavy now. Not the silence of fear, but of inevitability. Dispatch came back on the line. "I'm not getting a hit on the name provided. Can you confirm spelling?" The officer repeated it, more slowly this time. He felt irritation's spike systems were supposed to work. That was the promise. "You followed procedure, and procedure carried you through." "Stand by," dispatch said. Seconds stretched. A semi thundered past outside, briefly rattling the cruiser. The man shifted slightly in his seat, adjusting his shoulders against the partition. "You're crossing jurisdictions," he said quietly. The officer stiffened. "Don't give me legal advice." "I'm not," the man replied. "I'm giving you information." End quote. The radio crackled again. Dispatch sounded different, now less routine. "Supervisor is asking for clarification. Is this a traffic stop or a field interview?" The officer hesitated. That hesitation, barely a second long, mattered more than he knew. "It's an arrest," he said finally. Another timestamp locked into place. The man closed his eyes for a brief moment. "Not in defeat. In calculation." "Officer," he said, opening them again. "You need to call your sergeant." The officer ignored him and pulled the cruiser out of the lot. The gas station lights receded in the mirror, replaced by darkness and the rhythmic flash of red and blue. The road ahead stretched empty, deceptively calm. As they drove, the officer replayed the encounter in his mind, searching for confirmation. Non-compliance, suspicious behavior, failure to provide state ID. The words sounded thinner each time. The man broke the silence. "You know this will trigger a notification." The officer tightened his grip on the wheel. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I do," the man said. "Because my presence here is logged. My credentials are active, and someone is already wondering why my signal stopped moving." The cruiser slowed slightly. The officer said nothing. Would another one seem that was off fine? Miles passed. The radio chirped again, this time a different voice. A supervisor. Calm. Curious. "Unit 12, confirm your detainee's information again." The officer complied, heart rate creeping upward. He could feel it now, the subtle shift in tone, the way questions became precise, the way curiosity sharpened into concern. There was a pause. "Too long. Unit 12, the supervisor said carefully. "Do not transport further. Pull over. I'm en route." The officer's stomach dropped. He pulled onto the shoulder beneath an overpass, lights still flashing. Concrete pillars loomed overhead, graffiti half lit by the strobes. The man in the back exhaled slowly. "That's the moment," he said, almost to himself. "Right there." The officer turned. "What moment?" "When it stops being about you," the man replied, "and starts being about policy." Another cruiser arrived minutes later, then another. A sergeant stepped out, posture rigid, eyes scanning the scene. He approached the driver's window first, leaned in, spoke quietly. The officer nodded, face pale now, confidence cracking under the weight of unfamiliar scrutiny. The sergeant walked to the rear door and opened it. "Sir," he said, respectful despite himself, "can you state your name and agency for the record?" The man met his gaze. "Special Agent," he said, naming his federal agency clearly this time. Calm, unambiguous. The sergeant swallowed. Phones rang elsewhere in offices far removed from the highway. Emails began drafting themselves. Federal liaisons were alerted. A protocol breach flagged itself automatically, red and unmistakable. The cuffs were removed. Apologies followed, quiet, procedural, insufficient. The rookie officer stood off to the side, watching as the ground shifted beneath him. He hadn't meant harm. He hadn't acted out of malice. But intention, he was about to learn, was irrelevant. The man flexed his wrists once, then adjusted his jacket. He looked at the officer not with anger, but with something heavier. "This didn't need to happen," he said. "But now that it has, it won't disappear." The patrol lights continued to flash, illuminating faces, badges, concrete. The arrest was over. The record was just beginning. By morning, the incident no longer belonged to the street. It lived instead in folders, inboxes, and secured databases, copied, labeled, preserved. The gas station's fluorescent glare became a series of frames, time-stamped and silent. The night's confusion was reduced to data, and data had a way of removing excuses. At headquarters, the rookie officer sat alone in a small interview room with beige walls and a camera mounted high in the corner. The chair felt harder than it should have. His uniform was pressed, his boots clean, but something essential had loosened inside him. He replayed the stop again and again, searching for the moment he could point to and say, "There, that's where it went wrong." The problem was that it hadn't felt wrong at the time. It had felt procedural. Internal affairs arrived without ceremony. No raised voices, no lectures, just notebooks, calm eyes, and the quiet gravity of people who had seen this before. They started with basics: name, badge number, years on the force, training dates. "Field training officer?" one of them asked. He answered. The name was written down. "Last legal update refresher?" He hesitated, then answered again. The hesitation was noted. Across the building, legal counsel assembled in a glass-walled conference room. Screens lit up with body cam footage, paused at the exact second the cuffs came out. Someone slowed the video to half speed, then quarter. The sound of the metal clicking shut echoed longer than it ever had in real time. "Here," one attorney said, pointing. "That's the moment." They didn't say mistake. They didn't say violation. Not yet. They spoke in the language of distance and implication. Federal supervisors joined by secure line. Their presence changed the temperature of the room without a word being spoken. This wasn't personal for them. It was procedural, institutional. Their concern wasn't outrage, it was precedent. Training records were pulled next. PowerPoint slides from the academy, policy manuals with highlighted sections. Margins filled with handwritten notes from instructors long retired. The officer's signature appeared at the bottom of multiple pages, acknowledging receipt, understanding, compliance. Someone read aloud from the manual. "Federal credentials, when presented, require supervisory confirmation prior to detention." The room stayed quiet. Another page. "Questioning alone does not establish reasonable suspicion absent articulable facts." More silence. The narrative began to split, clean and unmistakable. On one side, intent. A young officer trying to do his job, following what he believed to be correct procedure. On the other, impact. A federal investigator unlawfully detained, a chain of protocol breached, authority misapplied. Intent, they all knew, would not carry much weight. In a separate office across town, the investigator sat with his own counsel. The cuffs were gone, but the mark of them lingered faintly on his wrists, a pale reminder that didn't need to be photographed to be remembered. He listened as the attorney laid out options calmly, methodically. "You can let the department handle it internally," she said. "There will likely be discipline, retraining, a memo." He nodded once. "Or," she continued, "you can formalize it. Preserve the record. Make it harder for this to happen again." The investigator leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. He wasn't angry. Anger would have been easier. What he felt instead was familiar fatigue, the weight of knowing that silence, however dignified, had a way of teaching the wrong lessons. "I don't want an apology," he said finally. "I want it documented." By mid-morning, emails moved faster than conversation. Subject lines hardened. Unlawful detention review, federal liaison inquiry, immediate policy assessment. The rookie officer was called back in. This time there were more people in the room. A captain, a representative from legal, an internal affairs investigator with a recorder placed squarely on the table. "Walk us through your decision-making." the captain said, voice even. The officer did. He spoke carefully, choosing words that had once felt solid. Suspicion, non-compliance, officer safety. As he spoke them aloud, he heard the gaps between them. And when the credential was presented, Legal asked. I didn't recognize it as valid, he said. Did you attempt verification? No. Why not? The officer paused. The honest answer rose first, uninvited, because I didn't think I needed to. He replaced it with something safer. I believed I had sufficient authority. The recorder caught the pause anyway. Bodycam footage played again, this time with audio enhanced. Every inflection mattered. Every silence grew louder. The calm tone of the investigator, the tightening edge in the officer's voice, the moment when compliance was reinterpreted as defiance. Procedure, the officer realized too late, was not armor. It was a language, and he had been speaking it incorrectly. Outside the room, union representatives whispered. Supervisors avoided eye contact. The building carried on, phones ringing, doors opening and closing, but a quiet awareness spread this wasn't going away. The investigator's formal complaint was filed just after noon, not emotional, not accusatory, precise, dates, times, locations, policies cited by number, the kind of document that left no room for reinterpretation. Federal oversight acknowledged receipt within the hour. By late afternoon, the department issued a preliminary statement, carefully worded, cooperative, emphasizing review and transparency. No admissions, no denials, just the promise of process. The rookie officer went home early, instructed not to report for his next shift. Administrative leave, they called it. He sat in his car afterward, engine off, hands resting on the wheel, and stared at nothing. He thought about the gas station. The calm man at the pump. The way the night had felt ordinary until it wasn't. He understood now that authority, once misapplied, didn't simply retract. It echoed, it multiplied. Somewhere downtown, policies were already being revised. Training modules flagged for update. A case file labeled with a neutral title began its slow journey towards something heavier. And the investigator, watching it all from a distance, knew this part well. The system was reacting not loudly, not angrily, but decisively. The street had been quiet that night. The consequences would not be. The gas station returned months later, no longer a place, but an image. It appeared on a projection screen at the front of the courtroom, frozen in fluorescent light. Pump 3. The dark sedan. A grainy figure in uniform stepping into frame. What had once been ordinary was now evidence, stripped of context and given weight. The courtroom itself was quiet in a different way than the street had been. No engines, no radios, just the low murmur of air conditioning and the careful rustle of paper. Wood polished by decades of similar cases reflected the overhead lights. The flag stood motionless in the corner, a reminder more than a symbol. The rookie officer sat at the defense table, posture straight, hands folded. His uniform was gone, replaced by a suit that felt unfamiliar on his shoulders. He had learned by now that this room did not care how things felt. It cared how they were recorded. Across from him, the investigator sat composed, flanked by counsel. He looked smaller here, diminished by scale, yet somehow steadier. The months had not hardened him. If anything, they had sharpened his resolve. The proceedings moved slowly, deliberately. That was the nature of accountability when it passed through institutions. Attorneys spoke in measured tones, their language precise, almost gentle. They didn't argue emotion. They argued thresholds. Reasonable suspicion, one said, pacing slightly. Not a feeling, not a hunch. A standard. Another followed. Probable cause, lawful detention, jurisdiction. The words echoed through the room, clean and impersonal. They were the same words the officer had studied once, memorized for exams. Here, they sounded different. He listened as his actions were reassembled, not as a story of intent, but as a sequence of decisions. The body cam footage played again, slowed, paused, rewound. The moment the investigator asked, "Am I being detained?" was isolated and replayed. The moment the officer hesitated before answering, the precise second the cuffs came out. Each pause became a point of analysis. each inflection a potential turning point. An expert witness took the stand, a former training supervisor with years of experience. He spoke calmly, without accusation. "This is not an uncommon failure," he said. "It's not about bad officers. It's about incomplete understanding." He explained how authority, when taught without nuance, could harden into reflex. How young officers sometimes mistook control for compliance, certainty for legality. The jury listened. Heads nodded. The investigator testified next. He didn't dramatize the arrest. He didn't raise his voice. He described facts, his location, his credentials, the way his calm had been interpreted as resistance. He spoke about professional harm not in abstract terms, but in consequence. Missed assignments, internal reviews, the quiet ripple effects that followed him long after the cuffs were removed. This wasn't about embarrassment, he said. It was about disruption. Cross-examination came and went. No fireworks, no traps. The truth didn't need theatrics. When the officer took the stand, the room felt heavier. He spoke about training, about officer safety, about decisions made in seconds. He admitted he hadn't verified the credentials. He admitted he hadn't called a supervisor before escalating. His voice never broke, but it thinned. "I believed I was acting within my authority," he said. "And were you?" the attorney asked. The pause stretched. "No," he said finally. That single word landed harder than any argument. The trial moved into its final days with a sense of inevitability. The legal questions had narrowed. The facts had settled. What remained was consequence. When the verdict came, it was read plainly. No drama, no applause. Liability was found. Damages were assessed. $2. Ini. 8 millions. The number echoed briefly, then settled into silence. It was not a victory cry. It was a measure, a translation of violation into currency, the system's chosen language. The officer stared ahead, absorbing it without expression. He understood now that the verdict wasn't about punishing him alone. It was about sending a message that would outlive his case. The investigator closed his eyes for a moment. Not in relief, in recognition. Justice, he knew, rarely felt like triumph. It felt like closure edged with fatigue. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Statements were prepared. Departments released carefully worded responses about reform and review. Policy committees convened. Inside, the courtroom emptied slowly. The gas station lights faded from the screen. The exhibits were logged away. The record was complete. What remained was the aftermath, unseen, ongoing, and far more lasting than the night that started it all. The check cleared quietly. No cameras, no ceremony, just signatures, routing numbers, and a transfer logged into a system designed to move money without emotion. $2.8 million left one column and appeared in another. On paper, the case was resolved. In reality, it had only changed shape. Inside the department, the verdict triggered a different kind of movement. Policy meetings replaced patrol briefings. Command staff sat beneath fluorescent lights, not unlike the ones at the gas station, flipping through binders thick with language meant to prevent repetition. Sentences were added carefully, weighed by attorneys before being approved by chiefs. Federal credential verification required prior to detention. Supervisory confirmation mandatory when jurisdiction is unclear. Small paragraphs, heavy with consequence. Training manuals were revised. PowerPoint slides updated. Recruits would now watch a blurred bodycam clip faces anonymized, audio softened, and be told that this was what misapplied authority looked like. Not violence, not malice, just certainty without understanding. The rookie officer's name was never spoken aloud in those rooms. It didn't need to be. His presence lingered in the margins. His career slowed in ways no memo could fully explain. Administrative findings followed him quietly, surfacing during evaluations, transfers, promotions never offered. He stayed on the force, but the trajectory he once imagined flattened into something narrower. Confidence was replaced by caution. Orders were double-checked. Supervisors consulted more often than pride would have once allowed. On night patrols, when he stopped beneath harsh lights parking lots, convenience stores, roadside shoulders, he felt the echo of that first stop. He heard the calm voice asking a simple question. Am I being detained? And he answered differently now. The investigator returned to work within weeks. There were no congratulations waiting for him. No sense of vindication. Federal offices did not pause for reflection. Cases moved forward. Briefings continued. He slipped back into routine with a quiet efficiency, his presence unchanged on paper but altered in feeling. Colleagues noticed he spoke less, that he watched more, that when authority was exercised around him, he paid attention to how easily it could tilt. The settlement money went where it needed to go. Legal costs, professional disruption, the quiet repair of something that could never be fully restored. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like closing a door that should never have been opened. Public reaction came in waves and faded just as quickly. Headlines flared, then vanished beneath newer outrages. Comment sections filled and emptied. Some called the verdict excessive, others called it overdue. Most moved on, but the system did not. Departments across the region circulated advisories. Training coordinators referenced the case without naming it. Federal liaisons tightened communication protocols. The incident became a reference point, a cautionary tale embedded into institutional memory. Justice, in the end, did not arrive with sirens or speeches. It arrived as revisions, as oversight, as restraint learned too late, but carried forward anyway. The gas station returned to anonymity. Fluorescent lights hummed. Cars came and went. No marker remained to show what had happened there, only the knowledge carried by those who understood how thin the line had been. Authority, the case revealed, was never about volume or force. It was about knowing when to stop. And sometimes, the loudest change a system makes is the quiet one that lingers long after the lights go out.